Hey, Free Money Podcast listeners. I'm Sharkbait Buckley, the Disclosure Pirate, and I'm here to set you straight about what's going on with this here show. Sloan Ortel is a spreadsheet wench that works for Invest Vegan LLC, a Utah-registered investment advisor, and the Woodcash Public Benefit Corporation. Yar. Ashby Monk is a sea dog that works for Stanford University. And KDX, when he's not minding the binnacle on the poop deck of this here man o' war. All opinions expressed by either Sloan or Ashby are entirely their own, and do they reflect the opinions of their crew and or any company. Clients of Invest Vegan may maintain positions in securities and strategies discussed in this podcast. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Invest Vegan and its representatives are properly licensed or exempted and a client agreement has been executed. Yar! Thanks for listening.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money,
Dollar.
Welcome to yet another glorious episode of the Free Money Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by Tom Brakke, who I think of as one of the keepers of the flame in active independent investment management with truly independent judgment. Ash and I talked to him about all sorts of things, but, we specifically talk about, what the heck innovation is, right? One of the things we say a lot on this here pod is that if you want to get fired at a pension, all you've got to do is innovate. For those of you who are a little bit risk averse or, looking to hold on to your jobs, it might be useful to know what exactly that is so that you could not do it. Or, for those of you that have a screw loose like me and like Ashby, maybe you're going to steer into that. Tom also really, is an expert in manager due diligence. Like, how do you assess an investment manager and make sure that they are the partner that you want for the long term? And I think it was really revelatory to talk to him about, some of the, the subtle nuances that, he feels are super important and often overlooked when doing that sort of thing, right? There's a tendency to sort of fly out to someone's headquarters, meet with, somebody in a fancy suit, and then just sort of decide that you've done your work. But Tom's approach is much more detailed, and I think you're going to really benefit from hearing him talk about it. Then later on in the podcast, we ask what's really been on everyone's mind since the beginning of this podcast, which is where was Ashby on January 6th? And, I'm just going to have to leave it to you to, get the answer to that for yourselves. Do your own research, as they say. We also, as per usual, talk about what's been hard in our lives recently. When we do the news and we do the gossip and we do the talking about the long-term investing. Welcome again to yet another super special conversation. And you know what? Thank you for giving me and Ash the space to record these conversations, because we do both benefit immensely psychologically from it. It always feels like a breath of fresh air. Now that I've thanked you, I'll beg shamelessly for you to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you've already done that, email a bunch of friends, send a letter to the editor, do some graffiti. Perhaps, start screaming in your supermarket about, F-Anon and all the wonderful things that you've learned about fiduciary investment management from this insane podcast. Love you all and can't wait to be with you again soon on another wonderful episode of this here pod.
Jeez.
Oh, no! Sorry.
Welcome to the Free Money and False Starts podcast. We are committed to the bit of screwing up the tech at every chance we get, aren't we?
I think we are. Somehow your voice just went far away, Sloan. I don't know what just happened, but you check your speakers or your oh no, now you're back.
Nice. All right, I just won't move and that'll be great.
I think it's the long delay we've had. And the fact that we're trying to live stream, that's like a level of sophistication, Sloan, that we don't normally take on for obvious reasons.
I mean, like I think it's an iron law, here on the Provo Palo Alto connection about institutional investing, that whatever technological sophistication happens, it's going to be a disaster.
It is. Yep. I hope everybody hears you better than I hear you, by the way.
Interesting. All right, let me see.
Oh my gosh, we are awesome at this. And people, if they heard this podcast, would be like, "Oh, you guys are just probably getting started with your podcasting." I think we've been going together for like 6 years. Like, if I can't remember the first one we did, but my favorite part about this moment for the live stream is that your video keeps bouncing horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical.
It is a visual medium.
It is,
and that really makes all the difference.
What we're trying to do is give this new visual personification for what it feels like to be on this podcast. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
And so what you're seeing is the pain and frustration that we live with.
I got to tell you, Ash, I honestly, this podcast feels like a breath of fresh air. I was doing my compliance record keeping this morning.
Oh my God. Me too. I went to the dermatologist today and they zapped off one of those. Yeah, I don't know if you can see a live stream. I got a little zap-a-doodle-doo right there. This is what happens when you become 47.
Got to get those moles inspected.
I do. I spent a lot of time rowing on boats. And I'm quite white. And so now my dog is trying to get in the mix. Do you want to hear my top? You want to hear the top?
Yeah, I want to hear your news. Do you have any, it's like I got all sorts of stuff must have happened.
I mean, when was the last time we hung out?
Oh yeah, it must have been like September. Shit.
My gosh, so much is going on.
Oh God.
Well, look, maybe I'll tie my top into the news and do a news top segment called
the trademark smooth.
Called Top News. Kill two birds with one stone here. By the way, killing two birds with one stone sounds mean. I like birds.
Yeah, not very vegan.
No. I just want you to know I said the phrase, but after it came out of my mouth, I was like, let's keep the birds alive. Let's not throw rocks at birds.
Let's plant two flowers with one spade.
Exactly. Okay, some of the top. So our friend Chris Ailman, who we've never had on the pod, but I know we both know, he won the Lifetime Achievement Award this week for just being a legend.
I'm honestly, I saw that and I was candidly surprised he hadn't already won that award.
I am similarly surprised.
As long as I've been aware of what's going on in the institutional world, I've been aware of Chris Ailman and the space he's carving out, and the difference in being able to, the cow plans have significant differences in terms of their staff turnover and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. I've noted.
I suspect that takes a little bit of leadership capability to execute.
He's just a lovely human being, and he's got strong opinions, and he's not afraid to even go on TV and talk about them.
Yep.
Chris Ailman is a TV personality. Which you can't say about many people in the pension world. But I did want to then
I don't think I could name a single other.
I think you're right.
None.
I got none. I tried for a second.
Yeah.
0. Chris Ailman is the one. Chris Ailman is famous for building quite a good culture of innovation at CalSTRS. I often joke about people from CalSTRS showing up in front of the board wearing goggles and lab coats to try to communicate the extent to which they are trying to be innovative. And they have 3 separate teams doing different innovative things. Our favorite team, Sloan, I believe, is the Kirsty Jenkins team.
Oh yeah, we love the
Impact team.
We love the Kirsty Jenkins stars. I'm gonna get to nicknames mood.
We've got a Kirsty Jenkins flag on the wall right next to our Friday flag. Throwback for those that are listeners.
Wait. So did you see it? So I over the course of our little interstitial period, I renovated our website, and I've been experimenting with AI, and I actually had the AI write and generate a bunch of day of the week flags.
You are kidding me. Sloan, I'm tingling right now. It's my. Are we doing it? Are we doing day of the week flags?
Yeah, I mean,
it's on its way. Okay, I'm thrilled
if
to hear that news.
Obliges,
Yeah.
The Monday flag is the best. It's so grumpy.
Yeah. Oh man, and you'd fly that with fervor. You'd be like, "Screw Monday,
Yep.
half mast the Monday flag." You know what I mean? Okay. Chris Ailman, neat guy, innovator, also came out a week or two ago. The collaborative model of institutional investment. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I heard about that somewhere.
Yep. Has, according to CalSTRS, delivered $1.6 billion of savings for the state of California while delivering the same or better performance. So if I could drop my mic, and I wasn't afraid about it breaking because it's kind of expensive, I would drop it because that's a contribution I feel like I might have made to the state through Chris Ailman, who did the work. Chris did the work with his team, but I had an idea,
Well, I feel like, there's a lot of, you have to kind of illuminate the path, right? And, I saw something really interesting that, my alma mater, Fordham University, under the stewardship of Gita Kapadia, is taking fixed income management in-house at their $1.5–2 billion endowment, right?
Oh, wow.
That is a shocking move. And for those of you who don't, intuitively go, you're going to manage $300 million in bonds in-house? You're insane. It's very hard to trade small amounts of bonds. So if you're not like a CalSTRS, there must be something really going on in the model, that they feel like they can, get that kind of edge over the giant, returns to scale asset managers in the most scale sensitive asset class there is.
Yeah, you trade bonds on phones just so that people understand the technology of bond trading. I don't even think you can use phones that don't have wires because you have to have that look of the long wired phones, one wire going this way, one wire going this way, you're yelling at people. It's classic. It's like trading
Gordon Gekko. Yeah, exactly. The suspenders, it's all there.
Okay, more news. The PPF, the Pension Protection Fund. I think the UK is going to get its first true sovereign wealth fund, and it will be an expansion of the PPF. I say that because the UK government also basically said that, but I am interpreting, so it's not like you're like, oh, Ashby's making a big call here.
For those of us who aren't up on it, what is the PPF for those of us who aren't up on the acronym?
Oh, Lord.
Myself, specifically.
It is the Pension Protection Fund. It's the guarantor for defined benefit pension promises made by corporations to individuals for which those corporations have defaulted.
Yep.
And the government steps in and says, we got you.
Yep.
And what's happened is they've done such a fabulous job of managing those defaulted obligations. It is now 160% funded, 160. And the UK government is like, whoa, these guys are pretty good at this stuff. That's how they sound.
Something like
what area are they good?
With this kind of efficiency, we could restart the empire.
My favorite, snooty British word is the word area. What? Area. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. But it's
I never had one to begin with.
Amazing performance. And so now the UK government, I think, astutely is saying, what else could we do with this platform? And so they have 60% of the assets are excess reserve. That can be now moved into an endowment pool. They're also offering other plans to then move their money in. So I think we got to keep our eye on the PPF because it's going to have a much bigger mandate than ever before.
I love, I love that, there's kind of this like thesis that runs through a lot of these episodes where it's like, if you get the emergency mandate, if you get the ability to do whatever needs doing, you have the capacity to do all kinds of great innovation and all kinds of great and like, however I feel like, I interviewed someone who ran, what's our equivalent of that in the US? The
PBGC.
Yeah. And for those of you following it or along at home, the reason this is important is because, like, when private equity firms, take over companies, defund their pension plans, pay themselves huge dividends, someone is on the hook, right?
Oh,
those retirees.
And it's you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like the song as old as time thing. But, like, weirdly, these investors have this habit of just being really astute and excellent. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, the PBGC and the PPF are unique in the world as safety nets for plans. And it actually, if I'm honest, isn't the general public on the hook. The people who set up defined benefit plans, the firms, they pay an insurance premium to the PBGC and the PPF that covers that. So it's that insurance premium. But then you get into that insurance thing where, like, oh, you have to pay insurance. That makes the cost of your DB plan more expensive, which makes it more likely you go out of business, which means it's more likely that the PBGC needs to take on your plan. I think we call that moral hazard in the industry.
The old-fashioned, like, what's the fastest car in the world? It's a rental car, obviously.
Of course it is. Holy shite. It's a great line. Okay, so I've done my PPF, my Chris Ailman, my collaborative model, $1.6 billion. What I was going to do off the top, which I'm going to do before our guest, because I think it ties together. I'll go on the fly here. I'll do it live, Sloan. I don't care. Is innovation. I've been experimenting with how we communicate innovation through the industry, and my new philosophy in the parlance of today, my new ontology. I used to do ontologies, and now it's cool. Everybody's talking about ontologies. And so now I got to go back and call it philosophies because ontology is too cool. But my new
resilience all over again.
I know. People keep stealing my stuff. My new idea here is we, as an industry, we use these models, the Canadian model, the Yale model, the Norway model, to communicate best practice. Okay. The collaborative model is becoming a model for innovation through peer-to-peer collaboration. I'm doing a bunch of work on the technology model, which we're calling the navigator model. But there's this other model, family office model, which I think we're starting to unravel a little bit. And here's what I wanted to float by you. I think of it now as the first on board model. Family office model is the first on board model in the sense that they are the first on board to hedge funds. They're the first on board to venture capital. They're the first on board to new asset classes like crypto and NFT kitties. And if there's a new fund being raised, they're the first on board. And so these family offices, everybody wonders why we spend so much time thinking about them. It's because if you think about innovation, the first place you have to turn to get an LP or whatever you're going to get. I don't know what it's called when you have a mutual fund. They're not limited partners. What are
An
they?
investor?
Investors. Okay. You go to family offices. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and it's really interesting. Like, I think, if I pull off a magic trick as a portfolio manager, like from the standpoint of craft, it's basically getting my clients to sign up for, like, no killing shit, and then whatever else I want.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but also to accept that I'm not going to report on that in the way that they might be used to seeing the report. Like, I don't.
Interesting.
Right. Like, I don't go and say, like, 10,000 chickens are not going to die. I just go and say, like, hey, you care about this, and I'm going to do my best. That's very family office-y to me.
That
right?
is.
Where you don't have committees, you don't have external stakeholders. And that fundamentally enables innovation. I'm so excited. This is like such a good lead into Tom. You're totally right. Because
I know.
Like, let's go to Brakkestan.
Let's go to Brakkestan. But before I do, I like how you articulate the vegan philosophy, which is don't kill shit. I think that's a very simple way of doing it. And now stop talking and scaring Tom that we're going to swear on this podcast. There's no swear words, Tom. Tom, good to see you.
No swearing?
Okay, fine. I was only joking. You can swear if you want.
Hello,
Tom
Smoke.
Brakke, everybody.
Hello, Ashby.
Good to see you, my friend. Last time I saw you, we were chilling at Stanford Cafe pre-COVID, I think.
Wow, you got a great memory. That's exactly right.
Your hair's looking fabulous, though. I think you grew it out.
Speaking of COVID, you should have seen it. It was halfway down my back during COVID. So
For real?
Oh man,
Yeah.
more of that. Let's normalize
more
that.
Of that. Okay.
Yeah, let's normalize, like, Grateful Dead style investor, fashion. But I guess, in the half pipe it's a little dangerous to have those beautiful long locks, so you got to shave them off. But Todd, we were just talking about a premise that I think is really interesting, which is Ashby is kind of formulating this idea that, kind of family offices are this incredible reagent for innovation in asset management, where I don't know what it is, because they're just down to be eccentric and institutions have to pretend like they're grown-ups, or whatever. But how do you think about that? In terms of who you're catering to and what it enables you to build as an investor?
Well, I think a lot of it is the entrepreneurial background of the family. And so for some of them, that just, I think, flows naturally out of that. They're used to taking risks. They're used to doing things differently than other people. And so that comes into play. Now, as a family office gets more institutionalized, they probably tend toward the more rigidity in terms of how they approach things, the structures that they have, how they think about things. They're more like other investors, perhaps. I don't know. That's just a thought.
I think you're right.
That makes yeah. I mean, a lot of them, there's a continuum between an asset manager and a family office. And when Steve Cohen was banned from the asset management business, he became a family office.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. One thing, if you could somehow look at the generations, so long established family offices versus recent ones and everything in between, and kind of see where the practices are, it would be interesting to see if it fell out that way.
My guess is there's an initial phase in family offices where you have this entrepreneur, as you said, who's taking a ton of risk to become a billionaire or whatever they are. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's the fifth generation family office that probably looks and feels like a foundation or an endowment. And I guess that we're interested at Stanford, Tom, just because we're starting to call them the first on board model, which is they're the first ones to back new managers. They're the first ones to experiment new asset classes, new geographies. I think it's because they don't have the same prudent person rule, maybe same fiduciary standard, maybe, but this is actually your wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
Maybe it's actually worth reminding people what Tom's wheelhouse is, Sloan.
Yeah.
I would like to know that too. So,
Well, okay, so I will say, I had the weird luxury early in my career of editing a lot of phenomenal and brilliant writers, and a lot of them I don't know how rich you are, Tom, but I assume you're not as rich as some of the guys that I edited.
safe assumption.
But honestly, editing you was the first time I was starstruck, and it lasted about one second because you were just so down to earth and easygoing. But I had the experience of learning, of just basically sucking up everything you wrote. And so Tom writes a phenomenal blog, et cetera, and also just really I think you're kind of one of the keepers of the flame of the old school weird ass investment management industry that we all know and love. And I think, to do one of our trademark smooth segues, I guess a good question to ask is, what the heck does innovation actually mean in this boring industry full of white men in blue shirts?
I'm glad I didn't wear my blue shirt. I start with basically it's a mindset, right? And I remember having a discussion with somebody who managed money, and we were talking about the endowment model, right? And so, I started talking about sort of asset allocation issues and whatever, and he said, It's really not that. It's really the mindset, and the mindset of sort of being out there on the forefront. What's new? What's interesting? Why? Just because it's new and interesting doesn't make it good. But why could this add to what I'm doing? Is there alpha out there on the frontier? Yes, that's where it normally is. I don't mean frontier markets. I mean just on the frontier generally.
Yeah.
And so I think then about the sort of explore versus exploit kind of continuum.
That's a great dichotomy.
And most investment managers are very much on the exploit end of it. In fact, they're so far on the exploit end of it, they can't see the explore part of it. They're just doing what they've always done. They're doing what's normal in the business and whatever. Now, where you ought to be on that continuum, depends on who you are, what your resources are. But that's true for anybody, asset owners, advisory firms, or whatever. Where are you at on that? And most of the industry is way tilted toward the exploit part of things. And so it's about that exploration, in all respects. And so depending on the kind of organization you're a part of, I kind of think of it as in one bucket, investment ideas and models. There's all the kind of innovation that you can do in there. And then on the other side is the organization. And there's very little, if any, of that going on anywhere in the investment business, that people are really rethinking organizations, putting functions together in different ways, being responsive to the capabilities that technology provides, that sort of thing.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Ash.
Well, I was going to say what you're describing to me is like they're kind of two poles. Like the exploit, obviously, like you need to do exploration to at one point be able to exploit.
Yes.
And there's all this research that talks about what I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to Google who the authors were while we were talking, but it's organizational ambidexterity. And I think one of the authors is a guy named Tushman, and I can't remember the other one, but I didn't figure it out. But anyway, really fabulous work because it's all about how you build organizations that can both exploit and explore. And I raised this kind of like weird academic theory because I think, Tom, you're like very well known for your work on due diligence and manager selection and thinking about the underpinnings of the organizations for which people are investing in. And so I'd love to just hear you talk about like when you're going into manager selection or due diligence, looking for innovation, are you looking for organizations that are ambidextrous? Like what does it look and feel like to actually find that innovative organization and out in the wild of asset management?
Yeah, out in the wild. The answer is yes. I think you need to be looking for that. And so if you take the sort of what I was talking about into the due diligence realm, again, the kind of exploration that requires you to think further out is not something that most people are doing when they're thinking about due diligence. They're not thinking about how the organization is put together, what its culture looks like, what that means, and all the way down to the nitty gritty. I've always found, I just sort of, after doing it for a while, organizations kind of are either, learning organizations or they're defensive. And the funny thing is that when I would talk to, so one of the things I always did was I always did due diligence. Somebody said once, you don't do this like anybody else. I go, wow, I didn't know that, but that's how do they do it? Yeah. Part of it is getting down into the organization and talking to people, and it's really the ethnographic kind of approach to it. Is the way I've always done it. I just didn't know the word until not that long ago, and I didn't know what it was. So that's what I do. But in doing that, you find out in some organizations, everybody's curious about everything, it seems like. You ask them a question and they'll say, you'll say, have you looked at this? And they'll say, no, we really haven't. let's talk. What do you think about that? Why should we care? Whatever. Or, yeah, we looked at it 6 months ago and, we didn't really think that was a great idea. And here's why. Let's talk about it. The other kind, and it didn't matter if you're talking to a junior person or the CEO or the CIO, they're all kind of in this, they all kind of react that way. And then there's the other class where everybody's kind of like, oh, why would we do that? Or, no, we haven't thought about that. Not asking why it might be of interest or anything. And so I'm looking obviously for that curious organization because it's going to stay that way. It's built that way. The culture is to do that. But the other thing is just, okay, if you're entering into some kind of a partnership, if you will, if you're giving money to an asset manager, you got to have some kind of a relatively long time horizon. Let's say 10 years. I just use 10 years as a default. So
Right.
What's this place going to look like in 10 years? You can ask them that question, but you got to figure it out for yourself in terms of where is it going? Because the ability to produce whatever you think they're producing now is going to decline over time just from the compression and the wearing off of edges. It's just the way the world works. So how are they going to get past that? And if you're not out there looking for new ways of doing things, the compression is going to kill you. There's no way you're going to keep whatever you're doing now that people are interested and impressed by, that you're going to be able to keep that going.
It's really interesting to hear you talk. I mean, like I feel like one of the big privileges that I had was like picking. Like you had this great piece about finding a special place and just like sticking with it as long as you can, as long as your development is there. It's hugely influential for me. And like when I talk to I've recently been talking to a lot of other people who are kind of at my level in the industry, right? Starting out, thinking about launching their first portfolio, their first fund. And there's this huge temptation to start the thing where they can attract a lot of assets and make a lot of money. And like, I understand it, but like, I think, people tend not to understand that like when you're doing long-term asset management, you're building a house you're going to have to live in for like 40 years.
And when you're building that's sort of like an emerging manager, a lot of times, let's just say it's a kind of traditional asset manager because it's an easy example to use. You might be in a firm and you get an idea about how you like to invest and you've probably had some success at it if you think you can hang out your own shingle. And maybe one or two other people that think like you do and you all go off and start a thing together. And okay, I got to get, the infrastructure stuff and I got to do the legal, deal with the lawyers or whatever. And then we're good to go and we're off and running. So what gets forgotten in that? Any kind of a thought of how you're going to build this organization, what you need, what you lack. And in many cases, those, let's say, three people that went off and did it, all thinking the same. And maybe the wind's behind their back and they do great for a while. And then they get in a situation, all of a sudden, they have no flexibility. They don't have the balance that they need in terms of types of people, ways of thinking, all this sort of wonderful cognitive diversity stuff. They don't have that because it was just those three people that thought, well, let's do this. And they thought everything else would be taken care of if they got operations set up and legal set up and obviously, and marketing too, eventually, obviously. But
I love how much you nail it. Like, oh yeah, once we get the operations out of the way, like outperforming is easy.
Yeah, it's once we show them the numbers, they're going to want it, right? Yeah. Well, so maybe they get lucky, but the market is chaotic. It's full of noise. Maybe they get lucky for a while, and then all of a sudden they're not going to get lucky because that's just the way it works. And so in those times, they're going to find that they don't have an organization that's really real. They haven't built an organization because investment people, for the most part, don't think about that. And so that's where a lot of those sort of initial forays go wrong. A lot of emerging managers stumble, not because of the investment side of things, but because they haven't really thought about, don't know about how to build an organization that can make good investment decisions.
This is a bit of a random one, Tom, but I've observed over the last 2 years or so that when asset owners are adding new technologies, their dream is that this new technology allows them to fire somebody on their team. That it's like, I'm going to get this piece of tech and I don't need Billy over here to do my pacing models anymore. I'm going to have technology. And what I keep having to tell people is like, actually, for technology to work, you need two new things. You need a champion at the top, and that champion is going to set a new process, because inevitably you're going to need a new tick box, a new diligence component. Something is going to change with the technology. And at the other end, you need a new super user, like in the old days when people would use Excel and not use their mouse. Those were the super users. Every piece of new technology needs that. And I have to imagine, as somebody who's observing innovation inside asset management firms, you're seeing like this like counterpoint where actually innovation requires more bodies, more resources, not taking away.
Well, and different kind of resources than they think about, and that have been in the typical model. So whoever thought that we'd be paying a lot of money to prompt engineers, but it's happening, okay?
Yeah,
and so
I know.
I read something recently. Who are the best prompt engineers? Liberal arts people,
Yeah.
All the people that nobody wanted to hire, didn't want anything to, although investment banks have been hiring him forever and putting him through the ringer and trying to make investment bankers out of them. And many of them have succeeded, and because they have to, but in that case, they've got the capabilities and they feel like they can teach them the investment stuff. So much of what happens now is that somebody says, I want to be in the investment business. So they go out and they, I mean, I've seen people that have done an undergrad in finance and, an MBA, the CFA, they can do everything on Excel. They can do all that sort of thing. That's great. But a lot of that's going to be replaceable. What's not replaceable is the ability to think about the fact that this is a social science. It's not a hard science. It's not arithmetic and fancy math. It is, you can believe me, there are people that can succeed at that, but they're very small numbers. They're really brilliant, people with quants. But it's really a social industry. The markets are social. The organizations are social. Watch the way people herd into this and that and follow each other around. It's a social industry. And so we need to be able to have sort of fully formed humans that are a part of what we're doing, or we're in trouble. If we have a bunch of very narrowly honed investment people, quote unquote, that's just not a prescription for success over the long term.
I feel like that's it comes out of it. There's like this, I call it the sports center bias in investment management, where you watch CNBC and you watch Sports Center and it's the same thing. And it creates this idea that stock picking is just fantasy football for men, on their day jobs, and that leads to an emphasis on athleticism, on heroic movements, on big risky decisions, and on zizzle zazzle, rizzle razzle, whatever. And the sort of I don't know, actually making sure that there's an organization there is just totally, that's a star-seeking culture. And so I'm curious, and really self-interestedly, I wonder, what are, if you're thinking of, let's say hypothetically, you're, suddenly a manager, and you're thinking about what your own development, your own personal development, your firm's development looks like over the next 5, 7, 10 years. You got a couple of priors, you got a couple premises, but how would you approach that, that question just in the abstract?
When you say manager, you mean manager of people or manager of assets?
Well, I mean, kind of both, right? I'm selfishly, I'm stuck basically in the transition from investment analyst to portfolio manager to actual manager to relationship manager all at once. But I think more broadly, like that's just kind of like this. Once you get to 35, you pass the CFA, like then what? Then you're in Brakkestan, I think.
Well, I think one of the things is that a lot of investment organizations, if you go in and say, so what are your personal development goals for the year? People look at you like, huh? What are you talking about?
It's like, what are you, gay?
My personal development goal is to have good performance. That's what I'm supposed to do. And so, so I think if it's on you, if you're looking at what you need to develop, you need to develop a broader skill set. And so, I recently did a presentation at CFA Society of Chicago, and I talked a lot about analysis plus communication. If you remember that, we talked about that years ago, Sloan. But
yeah.
That's sort of the formula that I use to think about any investment role and how those two play together. Well, in almost all situations, not exclusively, but in almost all situations, as you move through your career, you're moving toward the communication side of things. That's definitely the case if you ever want to run the place.
Yep.
And if you think about why so many chief investment officers fail, it's not, again, because they're not smart enough people. It's that they've never had to do it before. They were successful as a portfolio manager. They wanted to get higher up the ladder, and they said, we think you're ready to be a chief investment officer. They lack the communication skills. They lack the leadership capabilities to be really able to do that. And they've never been formed, if you will. They've never been brought along in that regard. And so I think, for anybody sort of in the business, it's really making sure that your set of skills first aren't narrow, and then to the extent you can keep up with, where things are going in your particular area, that where our technical skills required, that you're doing that too. But I think mostly it's broadening. It's really understanding that you're going to be able to do this through the work and through interacting with other people. And again, that's not culturally natural in a lot of organizations. In some organizations it is, but for the most part, that's not the case.
It's funny you say all that. I'm trying to figure out somewhere this morning I was reading a story. It might have been Morning Dispatch or something about how all of this data in the world that is now being matched and overlaid in creative ways actually allows you to sit back at your desk and believe that you understand the world around you in a pretty rich way. And there's been kind of a meta-analysis of academic research that shows the kind of, call it, ambition or boldness of inventions is reducing. And they're trying to figure out why that is. And the initial hypothesis, according to this thing I was reading this morning, was people aren't going and doing field work. People aren't going and doing like trying to understand the tacit, unquantifiable knowledge that exists in these ecosystems. And so as we get all of the data into the matrix, right, and we're just using the matrix to understand everything, we get this false sense that we know what's going on. And as the great Indiana Jones once said, you got to get out of the library and do field work. But we're not doing field work. I mean, the entire discipline of economics to me feels like they've lost the notion of field work. It was like the last Nobel Prize winning field work was the pin factory, Ronald Coase. I don't know if you guys remember that story. Specialization. Yeah.
I haven't read any economics since.
Ronald Coase won a Nobel Prize for a case study, and that was like maybe the one and only. It's just
I'm very much a fieldwork guy myself, as I said.
Yeah, you said the word ethnography earlier.
In terms of how I do things, one interesting question is, it's nice to be able to do this virtually to be able to bring 3 people together in disparate places and have a conversation and then send it out to the world. But how do you think about, remote versus on-site, for example? And what are you missing as a part of that? And that's one of the things I love to read about, anthropology and how people do things and what you can learn from doing that, and that tactile aspect of things is so important. And so I've always been a do your work on site kind of a thing. But so I think of, like, if I've done some evaluations of institutional consulting firms over time. And so I always ask them, I said, obviously tell me about your due diligence, how you do due diligence. Do you keep track of your manager interactions? Yes. Okay. So, how many, and they say, how many management visits have you had in the last? So we've had, 2,800 in the last year. Okay. So do you keep track of them by type? Yes, we do. Right. And so then you can kind of go and kind of drill down. How many were like this? How many were in person? How many was them, the manager coming to them? How many was them going to the manager, sort of a thing? But how you count is interesting, because are you really learning anything when you do some of these? So, like, yes, we visited manager XYZ. What did you do? Well, we sat in a conference room and talked to the CIO and a portfolio manager. To me, that's not a due diligence visit. You haven't done anything other than sit in a room and listen to the narrative, unless you're really super good at asking questions. You don't really understand. You might as well do that remotely, because you didn't really get anything that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And so one of the things is, if you're going to do field work, you can't just show up at an office and sit in a room and do the same thing that everybody else does. So, it's discovery. It needs to be discovery, not documentation. I mean, documentation will come with it, will come along with it. But your goal is discovery, is to try to figure out what others aren't figuring out. And you don't do that by going into a conference room and sitting down with somebody. So I consider that. And furthermore, how long are you there? Let's say, well, we were there for an hour. What can you learn in an hour? I had somebody one time tell me, they said, I heard somebody was at a firm for 6 hours. I mean, what could you possibly talk about? And I'm thinking, what?
A lot of stuff. Yeah.
If I go into a firm like that, I'm doing stuff, internal due diligence, helping them analyze organization, and I could be there 3 days, and still there's a whole bunch of things I wish I could have done, right? And so what portion of that should you try to accomplish as an outside due diligence analyst coming in? And how much of that time can you just peel off that other people are doing stupid stuff in terms of asking softball questions and taking down easy documentation? What can you use that time to do? Who can you talk to? What kinds of questions can you ask that are getting at aspects of the organization that other people aren't touching? And there's a lot of them. And so I think that field work, you have to, it's not just showing up, it's what you do when you show up.
One more point, Sloan, before you jump in.
Go for it.
What got me thinking about this, and I remember it was a Nature article, and it's called Remote Collaboration Fuses Fewer Breakthrough Ideas by Yiling Lin, Carl Frey, and Lingfei Wu, and it's in the latest version of Nature, and Nature's a great journal, just so that the listeners know. It's like highly reputed, highly cited. And the quote that I had copied down from it was, creating a data set allows us to explore the division of labor in knowledge production within teams across space. Okay, that's like a bit of jargony, but the next bit is good. We find that among distributed team members, collaboration centers on late-stage technical tasks involving more codified knowledge yet they are less likely to join forces in conceptual tasks. What that means is this whole COVID world that we've invented pushes us as researchers, analysts, investors to rely on the codified knowledge, to agree to partner together around those tasks that have some technical late stage component. And what we're losing by not going on site and like shaking people's hands and having dinner are those kind of conceptual moments that this Nature article claims has been the source of many massive inventions. And so we've all been kind of looking around for like, well, what are we losing with this COVID world, this post-COVID world? This is the first article I had found that's like, oh, wow, like maybe it's something we can define what we've lost.
That's bloody fascinating. I think, Tom, investment management has always been a distributed business. You've had teams that are sitting between Hong Kong and New York and London and whatever. Do you get the sense that there's a fundamental difference in scale and type that comes out of the COVID environment? Because of this remote bias where everyone's at home. Is it an order of magnitude or a couple of percent in terms of the culture?
I don't know is the best answer probably.
Yeah.
But, always the best answer.
Especially if you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to, in terms of context, I think that Ash, this is such a category box building business, that, whether it's asset class, whatever we talk about, it's just like we're building these boxes, and that firm is in that box, and that firm's in that box, and this person is, and that, and so innovation, one of the aspects of innovation, the way I think of it, is breaking out of those boxes, and not seeing, because where we draw the lines actually migrates over time, and the people that are blurring those lines or breaking through those lines are those pioneers, are those innovators that are changing things. And if you look back at almost anything that comes into being that's new in the business, it was sort of shunned before, or that's not what we do, kind of a thing. And then somebody says, I think we should do that, and they say, not around here, you're not gonna do that. Okay, I'm gonna go do it myself. I'm gonna be Mike Bloomer. I'm gonna take my payout and I'm gonna go do it myself. But whatever it is, and I think there's so much of that, and everything is so structured. So that codification that Ash talked about, I'm sort of intrigued by that. But I do think that the sort of distribution can reinforce that, and so that we lose even at the margin. So I don't think it's huge, but I think we're losing at the margin in an industry where we don't have much to lose, because we need to go the other way, because it's so structured in so many ways, and we're fitting this into that box and this into that box. And so we need to really push against that. And so in that sense, if the remote sounds like it works against that, at least from that particular study, which I find interesting. So I'm going to track it down.
Yeah, track it down. I'll send it to you.
I think that. Yeah. So just the point about innovation that I think is really important. How many times would you be sitting amongst a bunch of investment people and somebody says, I just read a Nature article today?
Yeah, maybe not often.
Only among the people that I hang out with remotely, not the people that I would bump into back in the day.
Yeah. So people ask me a lot, well, what do you read? And I always have trouble answering, because what they want is an answer that's an investment book.
Yeah.
And I read, other than Ashby's book, which was kind of about investments, but it's about, technology and investments and how they come together and whatever, but sort of a straight investment book.
So
I find uninteresting, boring, unhelpful, whatever, almost all of them. Sorry, authors. But what I read is so that when it first kind of struck me a few years ago about sort of how we might want to restructure some jobs and how AI assistants can help us and that sort of thing, it was in the CIA quarterly journal, whatever I can't remember what it's called, or I'm reading an article in something completely different from investments, and I see something, I go, oh my gosh. So innovation is recombination of ideas and the mixing of ideas.
Yeah.
And if we're looking within investment only, we're making a mistake. And so one of the aspects that I should have mentioned earlier, when you asked about what individuals can do, multidisciplinary approaches are just not a part of what we do in most investment organizations. And yet there's just this incredible realm of possibilities, whether it's just something as simple as how do we learn about organizational behavior? Well, we start reading stuff about organizational behavior.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. But there's all these crossovers from one area of learning to another, and we're not tapping into that like we should.
Tom, I know we got to let you go. I want to keep you for another 4 hours just to keep rapping. But one of the things I've learned in coming out of, call it like pretty mainstream academic departments and moving into an engineering school is engineering schools and engineers in general, they exist to solve problems. And so you choose a problem you're passionate about, and then you figure out what are the data sets available. Maybe there are no data sets, in which case you have to go collect either through surveys or interviews or case studies. And sometimes the problem you're solving is a problem of nothing, as in something isn't there that you wish was there, which is what I call the Seinfeld research project. You're doing research projects about things that don't exist. It's a show about nothing, right? And because oftentimes people come to me and they're like, hey, how can we get these pension funds to invest in climate solutions? They aren't doing it. And I'm like, okay, you're asking me to do a research project on something that doesn't exist. And they're like, I guess I am. The mainstream departments don't do that, right? But to your point, like the places I see thinking these thoughts are twofold. One, engineering schools, not business schools, which is going to piss more people off, but engineering schools and investment organizations that are like, what are threats to my portfolio? What are the things that I could be doing to differentiate myself? These are things that don't exist. And so there's something for us to all think about, maybe the three of us think about on the next chat, about that like multidisciplinary engineering approach to solving problems and what goes on inside the best asset management firms that are kind of doing the same thing. I know that's not a question, Tom, but please answer.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because Jim Ware, I don't know, Sloan, you probably know Jim Ware. I don't know if you do, Ashby, and Focus Consulting Group. And I really like Jim and I like their stuff. And I remember him saying, investment management people are the most creative people I've ever known. And I say, gee, that's interesting. I think they're the least creative people I've ever known. And the dividing line is exactly what you just identified. And that is, they've got a portfolio. They're trying to figure out what's going to happen. They need to be aware of, think Porter's 5 forces and all the different, forces that act upon them, and think about and where the opportunities are. And if they've got a small growth mindset, they're looking at every new little thing that comes around or whatever. But yeah, they're very active in that. My point is that everything else they could care less about and are completely uncreative about. So
it's like the rest of academia, by the way, where everybody's like in their little like theory,
Great analogy. And so what I want to do is I want to get get some of that creativity to flow out, to distribute to the organization, to see that what they bring to that portfolio is what they need to bring to their organization. And that's the connection between the two that I think, so I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's true that we can learn so much from that. And others should be learning from what investment management people are doing, but we also need to learn from others.
I feel like the worst thing about this business is all the money you can make, and how and how, like, kind of estimable the expected value is around it. Because like I think, when I was growing up, it was sort of like, oh yeah, I'll go work at Goldman Sachs, and then I'll go to Harvard Business School, and then I'll start my own private equity firm, and then I'll be a billionaire. And
that's
like,
the path, by the way, that is a real fast path.
Yeah.
That's good. Let me know if you need anybody.
Yeah. But like I think, like, I have friends who have proceeded along that path, and like, the human cost of it is incalculable. I mean, it comes in the form of drug addictions and broken marriages, and just a poverty of imagination. And like, I wish that investment managers got paid like school teachers, because it would kind of keep people in it for the love of the game, and not because it was a nice way to win prestige points, which kind of gets to the humility point that,
So picking up on that, because of the money, what happens is that the incentive and interest to do other things to make the organization successful over time dissipates. So if somebody's getting huge payouts from their portfolio capabilities, and they're running a big portfolio, they're doing well, and they get these enormous payouts, even if it's within a big traditional organization, they feel like, I don't need to spend any time. I don't need to be nice to anybody. I don't need to do anything else. This is what I do. This is where my gain is, right? And so the weight of the money really distorts the culture and the ability of these organizations to be sustainable over time. And so that's one of the things that's working against organization. So when you're taking that 10-year horizon, or whatever that longer term horizon is, to look at a firm, one of the things you have to think about is, what's the effect of the money, and what difference does it make? Because everybody looks like, oh, this is going to be great because everybody wants to make that money, so you want to be a part of that. But there's also forces working in the other way. So money brings you together at a certain point, and as we've seen in many situations, it tears you apart eventually.
Tom, do you ascribe to a philosophy like the fourth fund rule, where here's the fourth fund rule? Fund number 1, you're hungry, you don't know. Fund number 2, you're just starting to make money, you're still not sure you're going to. Fund number 3, you knock it out of the park. Fund number 4, you buy a sports team, you start thinking about a political career.
I do. And so the sort of kind of automatic re-up culture that, so I've seen, like, and you've probably seen this when you've been working with asset owners, re-upped with a top manager, re-upped with a top manager, re-upped with a top manager. Well, things are changed at that manager.
Yeah.
So one of my rules is, every organization is messy. My job is to find it, right? Then I can figure out how to value it, how to value the mess. But every organization is messy. So that's a good basic due diligence principle.
I love it. Let's put it on another free money t-shirt. Every organization is messy.
Yeah, and actually, like, that's a great plug. I don't know if I told you this, Ash. Gabe has been making free money merch in his garage with recycled floor tiles that he's been carving up. So like, I mean, like, cutting it out, inking stuff, making, like, screen printed shirts.
Speaking of money, it sounds like you might not be paying him enough.
Yeah, Gabe does everything.
Well, I mean, here at the Small But Mighty, I mean, like, I think, if you want to do real innovation, you got to be, willing to take some lumps for it. I think,
You do.
And yeah, I mean, and Gabe so far seems willing to take some lumps as well. But Tom, thanks so much for hopping on, and I can't believe it took us until like episode 55 to get you on this for this chat.
Tom, you're so fun. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks. Appreciate it, both of you.
Yeah.
Long distance high five.
Yeah.
Okay.
Try not to shred too hard. Man, I just like.
Okay.
It's funny, like as you think about this long term stuff, I'm thinking about this idea of death by GPS, which is kind of. So there's this road in New Mexico and Arizona where people routinely die every summer, right, because they run out of gas, and they basically they're just sitting around in their car, and this is the Intermountain West. It's not the most exciting drive a lot of the time. And you just sort of get in the zone with your podcast, and you don't realize that you're completely out of gas, and the next gas station is 75 miles away, because you got the GPS on your dash, and it gives you this false sense of certainty that you actually know where you're going and that you know how to get there.
Interesting.
Very load-bearing concept.
That's actually a different world from the Tesla, where it over charges you. You're often being like, we can skip this charger, or and go to the next charge. But it's trying to charge you constantly along these things, to the point where I'm wondering if they're trying to make money on charging in their algorithms, which they probably are, because they're kind of. Yeah. Anyway, we can get into the evilness of a certain leader over there.
Nicest guy in the world.
We would never tell our advertisers to fuck off. We would never do that. So.
Honestly, Elon Musk can go fucking jump in a lake as far as I'm concerned. I hate that. Although I will say, from a due diligence standpoint, it makes your job a lot easier if you're diligencing ESG managers, because any PM that owns that stock is full of shit.
Well, I just saw the Danish plans are going to divest from Tesla, which is wild.
Thank God.
Right?
That's a big move for that. For a big institution to divest from, a sustainability stock. It's a big move. But I want to keep moving, because we have listeners who are chomping at the bit, Ash, and I'm just going to make the sound.
What about hard things?
Oh shit, hard things. Okay, well let's do hard things. Or should we just
jump straight to we can do whatever you want to do.
Let's do hard things. What's been hard for you?
Well, I've been reflecting that I don't have. This is going to sound deep. This might take longer, but I don't think I have normal friends. I was I've been traveling all over the earth and all this stuff, and I realized on one of my flights, it was I have people in my life that I love, that I wish I saw more, including my family, including my friends from college, my friends from high school, and then I have people I work with that kind of fill that void for me of friends, like you, Sloan, like Elliot
right back at you,
Rajiv
my friend.
Sharma, Dane Rook.
Yeah.
These people that I fit into my professional world become my friend group.
Yep.
But I actually don't have much in between, to the point where I'm so busy with family stuff that if somebody was like, Ashby, I obligate you to call a friend and go for a drink tonight, I don't know if I could do it, dude.
That is so real. That is, well, I feel like, so the thing about investing is it's like being a jazz musician, right? Where you're into this world that no one gives a shit about.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? And especially if you're into it in an intellectually honest way, and not in I want to make $500K so I can afford a real watch way. Yeah. It's just so hard and rare to get people who make you feel seen and understood. And there's this weird moment. I mean, it feels for me when I'm really killing it at improv or stand up or something like that, where I'm just in the zone creatively, and someone like you, Jason Voss, Tom, those sorts of, can say the thing that unlocks the thing for me that scratches the itch I didn't know I had. And
maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Not to interrupt you, but it's I think for me, it's the deep pleasure I get is when I'm talking about my work is so much of my life. And
Yeah.
and when I'm talking with, the parents that are friends with my kids, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to go to this movie?" I'm like, "That'll be fun." Not really, if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I want to do spreadsheets.
yeah, no, but what I would love to do is be like, look, I've had this crazy idea about this topic, and I feel heard.
Yep.
My shit is too niche to be heard at cocktail party. Like, I can't go to a cocktail party and talk to people. People are like,
we don't have the gear where it's just like, oh, we can impress you with the trappings of wealth, because like I think that like it's just arbitrary and meaningless, and like I think if it just like, who gives a shit, great, you have a Gulfstream, but like so I've been like fixated on this idea, and I have like I'm constipated with an article right now about how like
that's one way to say writer's block. But that's
well,
awesome.
I feel like maybe this is similar for you. Like I feel like when there's something I'm working on that's really good, it's like involuntary, and it's kind of like being on rails, where it's like it's gonna come out of me one way or another.
I agree.
But it's not, but it's not pretty. So like this concept I'm working, like, so I have this, I basically realized Brigham Young and early Mormon settlers were community-driven impact investors by any modern definition.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a business in Utah that didn't get funded directly by the Mormon Church between 1860 and 1910.
Wow.
Yeah. And here's some Ashby bait. The church basically evolved this financial model that allowed its community to operate at a continuous capital deficit
throughout that entire time, and it's basically
what's behind the entire economic miracle of Utah. Right.
This was a development fund. The church's development fund.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of these things where it's like, it's not me saying that. It's like, I mean, yeah, some of the people in my family are like authoritative, whatever. But this guy, Leonard Arrington, who's the official church historian, said that. Joseph Smith's revelations, he had made 112 revelations. 88 of them were about economic policy.
No way.
Yep.
Oh, right. That's legit.
Yep.
Are those on gold tablets?
I mean,
I'm actually not making fun of anybody. I don't know.
No. Well, I mean, yes, they were, and for anyone's interested, I'll plug my grandfather's book. He just dropped a new thing on the golden plates.
Okay.
Like
but
seconds
so the
ago.
golden plates were the revelations. I don't know enough about the Mormon history.
I don't know how it matters. So I think like revelation is there's like a personal revelation thing. Right.
Okay.
So, I don't think that it's all the golden plates. I think a significant portion of them would have been the golden plates, though.
Okay.
But but like a big theological understanding is no separation between the worldly and the ethereal.
Got it.
Because the whole purpose is getting Earth ready for Jesus.
Good
But like, yeah, I mean, like my hard thing has been, I've been wrestling with we've I sort of am like at this point where, the firm is like barely, it's like we're barely making money. Like, I mean, our performance has been great. We're making money for our investors.
Which firm? Because you've got multi-entrepreneur now.
That's true. We have like 10 or 15 jobs each year at the Free Money Podcast.
But so this is not the stash.
Well, yeah. So Woodcash actually, I mean, so we're in like a valley of the death in the carbon markets where,
right.
Large institutions are not buying carbon. And like, so basically everybody at Woodcash is not taking a salary. Right. And that's a posture that's really amazing because it allows you to just survive. And in a startup, sometimes survival is victory in a startup. But like, Invest Vegan, we manage $1.001 million, basically, so we were like, I was literally like, Gabe, I don't know if I can make payroll this week. And then an old client just like randomly deposited a couple $1,000, and that just it was a Christmas miracle this morning.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it would it's like, but those sorts of like picayune day-to-day pressures, intersect with these incredible, like I'm on the board of this organization that's getting sued by a bunch of fucking Republican attorney generals, and like all the kinds of crazy shit is happening there. It's like the bathrooms thing all over again, except they're not coming after my friends who do sex work and porn. they're coming after my friends who do like weird ass ESG stuff that I never thought anyone would be interested in.
I know.
You know. Anyway.
I know the bad boys and girls of finance doing sustainability.
Like, yeah, like, I mean, these are like the people who are like, you know, I'm just gonna go live on a farm for a while, and like I'm really into, like it's just, I mean, so it just all feels so topsy turvy, and like but you know, I'm so grateful. I had this moment where I was in a meeting with a bunch of other like super leftist investors, and you know, we were talking about due diligence, and there was this thing that we pay attention to, have paid attention to forever, that's not on anybody's radar: taxes. Like, you know, I was like, yeah, we actually look at our firms paying their taxes because we think if they're taking advantage of the tax code, that's not a sustainable thing, and it deteriorates the quality of the profits. Imagine that. And everyone's like, what data set are you using for that? It's like, dude, it's in the fucking, like, you know, K's, it's in the K's and Q's, baby. Like, it's, I mean, you could strip it straight out, you know, so like, it just, I think the strange thing, and Voss is the person who unlocked this.
People forget like what fundamental analysis is at a certain point.
And it's, yeah, exactly. It's like, huh? Like, come on, man. You know, and so like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills sometimes, you know, when like you know, I think that's just kind of like, and you know, the nice thing is every time I talk to my clients, I feel so grounded. You know, because I'll go on a rant and they'll be like, oh, I'm so glad that you that makes sense to me now.
Awesome.
You know, and I'm like, that would have gotten me fired at every one of the largest investment management firms. Anyway, I mean, I gotta ask this. I've been so excited to ask you this question ever since it came in. Because like,
is this the Dear Ashby?
So yeah, I mean, like, you know, I think inquiring minds want to know, where were you on January 6th?
Well, I was in the state of California. I was not in Washington, D.C.
That's a due diligence question for you. Just start the conversation right there.
In or around January 6th. Were you near D.C.? Were you? No, I think I was still in the COVID world. You know, I actually went back to my calendar. I might have just been still living in a glow after the election of happiness, you know?
Oh,
and
yeah.
chuckling to myself at these idiots. And then it got serious and stopped chuckling. But,
yep.
you know, like, I went back to my calendar and be like, what the fuck? I had a bunch of meetings. You know, we were in the process of onboarding at Adipar, our RCI.
Oh,
acquisition.
yeah. Wow, that
like,
is...
Because the acquisition was December 31st of 2020. Yep. And so that first week we were like all in all these meetings of like, oh, here's Ashby meet the team. And so I'm trying to remember, like, yeah, for me, it's not quite like remembering where you were on, like, I don't know, if it's like people say about JFK or
like 9/11 or
9/11
you know,
or I was home, but we had all been home for so long at that point.
Yep.
Like, people forget, like, that's near the end of all the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah. I mean, like, I was actually in therapy as they started storming the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
And and I got a news alert, and like my therapist, like my queer trans therapist, and I were like sitting there going, "Oh my God, these nutcases, whatever." And I was like so glad that my dad was not part of the crowd. Like during, because like that was my first thought is like, like, I mean, you know, like it just like, you know, my dad hangs out with like Steve Bannon and co, you know, and so I was like, I felt so gratified. I was so proud of him. And then shortly after the therapy thing starts, I get a text from a friend. It turns out he's been live streaming the whole thing.
No.
It was like fucking Zelig. I mean, just that, but like really one of the great comic moments of my life, I think.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, of course, I mean, like, you know, whatever, ideologue's gonna ideologue. You know, and you know, yet another smooth segue. I mean, like, so this is something that came in to me from a client. Okay. You know, like, and like, I don't feel so. The question is, should Israel be getting exemptions under human rights exclusion policies? Or should these rating agencies be ashamed of themselves? And the reason why that question is relevant is because basically a bunch of special purpose interest groups have worked the ref in a lot of these kind of like exclusion and monitoring, like the MSCIs, the Morningstars, whatever.
Yeah.
And so like there is a UN criteria for human rights that does not apply to Israel in your global portfolio.
Interesting.
And like I struggle with where to even start on it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general, like I find it frustrating when rules get ignored. Like I can remember I did a big project. This is actually what introduced me to pensions. I did a big project for a pension fund looking, and I'll remove the name because it's embarrassing for them. But I did a big project for a pension fund in like 2007. No, it was actually 2004. And they were trying to pick 26 emerging markets to pick. And they were going to pick the 13 of the 26. They studied 26 markets. They were going to pick 13. They established what they claimed was a criteria of selection that was objective, including human rights, fiscal monetary transparency, and rule of law.
Yep.
And we went around and we studied all these places around the world. China was one of them. You'll not be surprised to hear China didn't rate very well on some of those topics. And at the end of the process, they invested in China. Because they're like, well, I know that we set this whole protocol, but we kind of got to invest in China.
Lines going up. You can't. Yeah.
Yeah. Money Go Up is that new book. I want to read that book. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, it's a crypto book.
Oh,
It's
holy
called
shit.
Money Go Up. And it's got like a profile of SBF. It looks amazing. Anyway, this whole thing that you're describing around Israel right now reminds me of that a little bit. And I get there's nuance and there's issues.
Oh, yeah.
There's stuff that's hard to appreciate. But like, don't ask me in that project to go do all this freaking work and come back with like the 26 countries rated according to the criteria and then just ignore it. That pissed me off. Like either the methodology is wrong, and so we should revisit the whole methodology. I don't know.
Or it's
The whole
active
thing,
management.
Like I am not smart enough to weigh in on these issues in the Middle East. I am not good enough. Yeah.
Like I just sort of think about it like, all right, like I don't want blood. Let's not kill shit. Let's not be around shit that kills shit. And like, if there's a situation where it's war and conflict and people are being taken advantage of, let's stay away. But like that's like classic finance, right? We flatten things into this like really simple decision. Like where for me as an active PM, I could just be like, yeah, fuck it. I don't want to own that shit. I can walk away.
Yeah.
But like in a world where you're constrained by these like mandarins at some index body, that to me like just stresses how screwed up it is that we let the ESG industrial complex take over what it means to do sustainable investing. Because like by letting them seem objective, like you create these like then it matters what a bunch of people in a conference room say about this.
This is where like the ratings versus the facts.
Yeah.
Like you should just be collecting the facts that you care about, and then if there's certain facts you don't want to be involved with, then you can divest.
Exactly.
The facts are like how many lawsuits, how many hospitals bombed. I don't know what the I don't know what the facts are you're interested in. But
market cap of the Palestinian stock exchange versus the Israeli stock exchange, I think says a lot.
Maybe, sure. I think it's quite different. But those are just facts. Like you can't debate the politics of, these numbers. I mean, I think people are debating the politics of like, well, how many dead, how many, the hospital blew up, but there's 10 miles of underground tunnels like for Hamas militants. And then you start to be like, I don't even want to think about this anymore.
Yeah, and like as a Gentile, there's only so much I can even really say, right? Like I'm not, like from the Middle East. I'm not, Jewish. So there's like deep-seated traumas on both sides that are so hard to really wade into in a thoughtful way. But like again, what we're supposed to be good at in finance is flattening shit and moving on.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point. We're like also not only flatten shit, time machine. Because we're like projecting out into the future. So we flatten all this like qualitative and quantitative information into a very simple decision, and we project it or we discount it.
Yep.
And so we're like a time machine flattener. You know?
Yep.
Pretty funny.
Yeah,
when you think about
and
it.
we're like cool with being wrong. Like I'm like wrong like a lot. You know.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, like yeah, it's that it's just that's one of the hard things. Is like you're just like I don't even know where to start on this goddamn thing.
Me neither.
So, like, you know, do I want to like, you know, mail out like copies of like Gramsci to everybody so that people can be like literate in like, you know, like I don't know.
I don't know.
But yeah, here's a fun one to take us out. So it's 2051.
Okay.
Donald Trump has been elected president posthumously and unanimously for the 9th time. Why are you in jail?
Oh man, I appreciated you sending me that one early. That one required some. I was like, "Holy shit! What? Because then you're like, all right, what are the implications of another Trump election? Because to get real, you know, the guy's
8
like,
more
oh,
Trump elections.
I'm not going to be a dictator. I'm not going to be a dictator, except on day one. He said,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. That was like this week. Except on
shit.
day one and every day after, you mofo. Well, so where I went with this, and you can critique, is like, who does Putin lock up today?
Ooh, yeah.
He locks up truth tellers. He locks
Yep.
up people who publish research and journalistic articles that are critical. And undoubtedly, as an academic trying to solve problems in the world, you know, I would continue to write about the need to solve climate change. You know, there's a bunch of stuff like that I bet could get me, you know, my version of free speech doesn't quite align with his version.
Very diplomatically said.
I'm trying to be good. Yeah.
You know, you're suddenly
I forget
aware
that we're on the Free Money podcast and I can basically say whatever the hell I goddamn want. So I
This
go
is
on
the
other
coziest-
podcasts. Yeah.
Coziest podcast on the planet. Like it's like you know, because it's just. I mean, yeah, I worry that like if we start like if I start you know being like openly hot, you know, because it's like part of my like nice secret is that I just like no one actually knows how attractive I am, and so I don't get
Very
any,
attractive,
yeah, and so I don't get any bullshit. But I think that might fuck it up if we keep doing this YouTube thing.
So here's what I actually think is fun now that we can get real. I love to remind people that Trump is like a terrible businessman.
Yes.
There's all this data that shows that his parents basically over their lives gave him and his siblings $1 billion. $1 billion. They should have paid $550 million in taxes, but this is where he learned his tax dodge. They only paid $5 million in taxes. And when you think that like the net present value of that today, according to some, is like, oh, it's 1.8 billion was the latest one. Somebody says it's 3 billion. He claims it's 12 billion, but everybody's like, no, that's a lie. He's terrible. Like in the last 35 years, he's earned like less than inflation.
Yep. I mean, it's the flashy Sports Center shit all over again. Like, you know, he is the guy who's like telegenic. He comes on, you know, people who don't understand what's going on feel like they do when they listen to him talk. And it ties into their like, you know, need for a daddy to just be in charge. Yeah.
So maybe I'll get locked up in 41 years for just reminding people that he's a terrible businessman who's not good at business.
I mean,
and,
I think.
Yeah. Anywho, as a businessman, which I am, I take offense that people think that's good business.
I would probably execute my so we have a like, you know, emergency preparedness plan, like every regulated asset manager.
Oh, you got to.
You got to, right? But ours is a little unusual because we're out in Utah where my family has been since the 1870s. And there are various like little places tucked in, you know, but it like literally our plan is that Gabe is going to like the last of us himself over to like this ranch. You're welcome as well. And we're going to have a lot of guns and I'll probably start drinking again. And we're just going to fucking, you know, like we're just going to secede. I mean, like we're just going to like do exactly what the people who built this house did 130 years ago and secede from the United States.
Wow.
It's a playbook that's well trodden, you know, just forgotten.
Oh no, are we over?
Yeah, we're over. We're probably
Hold
both late
on.
for meetings.
Garden tip.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Here's what's happening. My dog gets these little burrs. My mom had the genius idea to take the burrs out of my dog's fur and plant them into pots to figure out what is giving my dog all these little burrs, and we will then try to remove that from the yard. I thought that was the most genius garden tip.
Is your mom a wizard?
Yes.
Holy shit, that's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, like I'll pick up from there.
Do a fast one.
This is the season where you go walk on the side of the road, pick up seeds. That's the best and healthiest stuff you're ever going to get. It's already adapted to your local climate. You see wildflowers, you see sunflowers, just go, pull over and pick them up. They're free. No one's gonna arrest you.
Are you sure?
Well, you know what? I mean, like, we're all basically committed to being in jail by 2051.
That's
like
true.
being,
Now that we've, yeah.
It's like, fuck net zero. We're going to prison.
I do like the idea of the flowers on the side of the road, though, or wherever, because it is fun to just plant stuff that you find. I got an oak tree I'm putting in that came out of a frickin' acorn. I love it.
I mean, like so I read a study this morning, not in Nature because I'm not, like as prestigious as you, Ash, but one of the finding claims that 80% of invasive plants come from the nursery industry, because people tend to buy these incredibly, photogenic but not well adapted and toxic things, and then they overgrow their boundaries.
I have 5 Japanese maples that probably have no business being in my yard. Don't you think?
I mean, hey, we've got Kentucky bluegrass all over the place.
Exactly.
But yeah.
All right, my friend.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.